Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next installment of our Sound and Story series, All Creatures Great and Small. To begin, a whale-sized thank you to Pablo Center for having us as part of the Pablo Streams series. We are happy, as larks, for their partnership. See what I did there? Thanks, too, to the UW Foundation for their support, as well as our donors. You are all the bee's knees. And that concludes the animal pun portion of this evening. Now then, y'all ready for some songs and stories? Because tonight we've got it all. Music from Humbird and The Nunnery, visuals from Eric Elstrand, and stories from 4 fantastic storytellers, all of whom I will introduce now and who will appear directly into your screens momentarily. I want to add, too, that tonight we are profoundly appreciative to have Rachel Kahn serving as our American Sign Language interpreter. We are so grateful to her for sharing her gift by signing our stories so that all might enjoy. In a moment, I'll share my own very brief piece, followed by our main attractions, Humbird, The Nunnery, and storytellers Steve Betchkal, Bekah Weitz, John Hildebrand, and Katherine Schneider and Calvin. And now, to kick things off, a not-so-tragic tale about the loss of a not-so-beloved pet. Losing a pet is hard, but less hard when it's a cockroach. We recently said goodbye to our beloved Cocker the cockroach. He died the way he lived, mostly ignored. The worst part, said my daughter, was that we forgot to feed him. What my son will miss most, he said, was giving him water. We were always pretty good about the water part. At the backyard funeral beside the pine tree, we tried to send him off with all the pomp and ceremony deserving of a family pet with whom we shared 17 weeks of our lives. We offered a 1 Nerf gun salute, read selections from Shel Silverstein and Tennyson, and then spent the next 15 minutes bickering over who got to use the shovel. Once the hole was dug, it occurred to us that we'd forgotten the guest of honor. We'd spent so long preparing Cocker's butterbox casket that we'd forgotten to place him inside. No matter. My 5-year-old daughter was on it. She ran back into the house to retrieve him. I took advantage of the quiet moment with my 7-year-old son to offer a few words of wisdom. Death sucks, I said. And then the miracle occurred. My breathless daughter burst through the screen door. "You guys," she cried, "he's still alive." I grew worried. The resurrection of a pet I didn't want in the first place seemed precisely the kind of joke I'd come to expect from the universe. Sure enough, upon closer inspection, Cocker reaffirmed his aliveness by way of a 1-antenna salute. It would take more than benign neglect to send him packing. The kids rejoiced, while I grumbled. You mean we dug that hole for nothing? But the miracle was short-lived. Within 24 hours, Cocker the cockroach took a turn for the dead. Moments after learning of Cocker's actual death, my wife, children, and I drowned our sorrows in pancakes. 2 pancakes deep, we lifted our glasses. To Cocker, we toasted. And then, much to the bafflement of the children, my wife began to cry. Now, in our household, it's a well-established fact that my wife's love for Cocker rivals my own. Why then all the tears, the children wondered. What I've neglected to tell you is that Cocker died on the first day of school, and that this wasn't any old school year, but my daughter's first. Within the hour, our little girl would slip an unseemly large backpack upon her shoulders and embark on the grand adventure of kindergarten. While I'd managed to block this new reality from hitting me smack dab in the heart, my wife's efforts had proven less successful. Because I'm a strong believer in the many virtues of a good public cry, especially when I'm not the crier in question, I enticed my wife's waterworks further by reaching for my phone and queuing up Fleetwood Mac's Landslide. "Are you trying to make me cry?" My wife laughed through her sniffles. "Shh, let it flow," I whispered. "We're all gonna miss that cockroach." She rolled her eyes until they settled on our daughter, whose impish smile had turned to worry. At last, reality hit me smack dab in the heart, too. The kids threw their arms around their mother, comforting her in the right way, though for the wrong reason. "He was the best pet cockroach we ever had," my son told her. What could my wife do but agree? Half an hour later, and just minutes before the first school bell of the year, the kids and I conducted our second cockroach funeral in so many days. This time, we finished the job. "Cocker, we loved you to death," my daughter whispered as she placed a shovelful of dirt atop his casket. "Yeah," my son agreed, "to death." As we laid that cockroach to rest for the second time, I was stricken with an inconvenient truth. Somehow, the same species that had thrived for over 280 million years, a species, I'll add, that can live without a head for a full week, still couldn't survive the likes of us. We flattened the ground with the shovel blade, placed a rock atop the dirt, and then, following one last recitation of where the sidewalk ends, hit the sidewalk ourselves en route to school. By the time we arrived, the kids had mostly forgotten about the best pet cockroach we'd ever had. In the not-too-distant future, I imagine I'll forget about him too. But I'll never forget that cockroach's greatest lesson, which happens also to be life's greatest certainty. No matter how hard you live or how much you love, we're all destined for life's long nap. But not that day, because that day was a school day. The bell rang, and the beat went on. Humbird and the Nunnery.
What do you suppose is the most formidable land animal in all of North America? Is it the moose, grizzly bear, polar bear, the mountain lion, perhaps? No, not if you're a camper. I have a healthy respect for each of these noble, hooved or clawed or fanged wild organisms. However, the one land animal that dominates the anxieties of the common camper is the North American raccoon, Procyon lotor. If you've ever camped, you know what I'm talking about. Raccoons look cute with their roly-poly carriage and their little black digits and their darling bandit masks. But no other living creature so boldly stalks the borders of malevolent mischief. Brunei Island State Park in Cornell, Wisconsin is a favorite recreational destination of mine. My family and I have spent many weeks camping there. And when we go, we've learned to gird ourselves for battle. The first time we camped there, I was awakened by the sound of cataclysmic crinkling. It was a persistent and insistent racket, the night rent by the foreign intrusion of violated plastic. After 10 minutes of puzzling what I was listening to, I got out of my bag and unzipped the tent door. Focusing my flashlight, I discovered their cartoonish rendition of two reflective eyeballs staring back at me from 15 feet away, and below them, bared teeth. A raccoon had retrieved an empty bacon bag from somewhere, and after freezing me with its throaty growl, the animal jammed its full head back into the greasy plastic sleeve and began to lick with satanic gusto. The brazen little bastard, I thought, taunt me like that. I'll show you. I emerged from the tent, all 6'2" of me, bunched behind my outstretched flashlight saber. Yah, I huffed, yah! The beast, its snout slick with lardy grease and still clutching tight the bag, held its ground. Yah, I jabbed again, thrusting my electric torch like a rapier, and he withdrew slightly. As I parried forward, he begrudgingly retreated to a tree at the site's perimeter. I snatched the bacon bag and, realizing there was no garbage receptacle within easy distance, had to retrieve my keys from the tent and stash the trash in the trunk of the car. When I re-zipped the tent, the vile little monster was still glaring at me from the tree, plotting his revenge. On another campout at Brunei Island, I was enjoying supper with my family when we noticed movement in the next site over. It was, of course, raccoons, but this time still light out. The family across the way, in their haste to get out and recreate, had neglected to clean up after supper. So we watched, transfixed, as the raccoons rummaged through their leftovers and enthusiastically licked out their dishes and cooking pots. The absent occupants had hung a styrofoam bait bucket from the tree above the picnic table, and it didn't take long for the raccoons to sniff it out. One of them found it difficult to flip the lid, so he simply started chewing his way in. You know what the sound of a raccoon chewing styrofoam sounds like, right? Let me see if I can replicate it for you. Squeegee, 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 squeegee. After what seemed like an eternity of chawing, the varmint had created an opening large enough to jam an arm in up to the shoulder point, and he spent another entertaining half hour finger fishing out minnows and crunching them like baby carrots. We waited up for our neighbors to return just so we could listen to their astonishment at finding the homestead ravaged. The truly amazing thing is that even after setting the table for wild animals, they were scandalized that it had happened. And we haven't even told them about the plates and pots now glazed over with raccoon spit. Point Reyes National Seashore, just north of San Francisco, California, is famous for its raccoon problem. They have warning signs all over the place. Beware this, beware that. The animals here will crunch you like a baby carrot. Dear God, look out. doesn't mean you'll see them coming. On a backpacking trip there, I'd come limping into my campsite well after dark, so exhausted I skipped the tent setup and simply plopped my bag down and crawled into it. I was the only human inhabitant in the entire campground. I'd been laying there maybe 10 minutes when something growled 5 feet from the zenith of my head. I sprang into a half-sitting position, hackles at full attention, fumbling clumsily for the flashlight I'd stashed in my boots. A raccoon, teeth exposed in an evil grin and eyes blazing like red-hot gold nuggets, crouched in the beam of light. I caught movement at the corner of my eye and, sweeping the flashlight right and then left, another one, another one, and another one. The raccoons had me surrounded. "Yah!" I yelled, jumping to my feet in my socks and boxers. "Yah! Yah!" And the animals scattered like hairy tumbleweeds in a sudden dust devil. Pulling on my pants and boots, I scooped up my bag and pack and scurried over to the site's picnic table. Extending vertically from it was a 5-foot metal rod with 2 prongs at the top. It kind of looked like a lightning rod, but for thwarting jumped up, pumped up, puffed up, camp-robbing weasels. I hung my backpack high on the upright metal pole, spread my bag across the picnic table below it, and crawled back in. Couldn't say I slept much. The gang of raccoons, having regrouped, circled me all night long, sometimes chittering or sputtering or growling. Every once in a while I'd hit them with the flashlight beam just to make sure they weren't getting ideas, but none put so much as a dainty dew claw on the picnic table. They were gone by the time dawn arrived, called back to the halls of hell, I supposed. I shed my bag, greatly relieved, and enjoyed the breakfast denied them. After another 10 miles trudged with a pack, I stumbled into my next campsite. This time I pitched the tent. At sunset, I summited the picnic table to properly hang my pack and, catching movement in my peripheral vision, spied the first of that night's marauders. It shot past on my left like a furry bowling ball, straight for the garbage can 40 feet south of the tent. It swung itself up onto the covered can with its nimble little coaly black digits, then popped in through the swinging lid, disappearing inside. When I retired to my nylon shelter, it was still inside the garbage can, banging around like a basketball in a dryer. I spent the night shooing the other raccoons away from the tent, often making contact with them with the hand through the nylon fabric. Whack! The first thing I did come morning was peek inside the garbage receptacle, fully expecting to see a snarling mammal at its bottom, its lips smudged with greasy detritus. But the raccoon was gone. How it passed back out through the one-way swinging lid is still, in my experience, one of the greatest mysteries of the wide, wild universe. Exactly 20 years later to the month, I returned to Point Reyes, this time with my youngest son, Emerson. Same campsite, in fact. A full circle of burly Betchkal male tradition. No sooner had we peeled the packs from our shoulders at site number 2 in Coast Camp when a pair of raccoons rustled the thick brush. Emerson was impressed at how tame the animals appeared to be as they ogled us from the periphery of the dense vegetation, maybe 10 feet from where we stood gawking back. The 2 raccoons popped out of one bush, then rustle, 15 feet to the left. In a mere 30 seconds, they'd circle to the opposite side. Reconnoiter completed. Hold tight to your meat stick, I sneered, instructing Emerson to immediately stash anything that was remotely edible: cheese, gorp, beef jerky, sweat-stained clothing, fingernail clippers, in the bullet, firebomb, and raccoon-proof metal strong boxes provided by the National Park Service. When all was secured, we could finally relax and take in our surroundings without fear of ambush. The campground, though crowded with vegetation, had no trees, none. We were ensconced in a sea of scrubby 3 to 5 foot high bush lupin, in an open basin that sloped up rounded ridges on three sides, with the pristine Pacific seashore blocked by a row of low bluffs on the west. We couldn't see the other campers across the trail in site number 1, but we could tell they were there because we could hear them. "Oh, look, a raccoon. Aren't you cute?" said a woman's cute voice. For supper, Em and I opted for mac and cheese and tuna, nice and smelly. Raccoons love that. Again, the couple at the site across the way. "Well, hello again. You stay away from there now." Em and I exchanged knowing glances as I stirred the noodles. Plump and al dente, we drained them into the fire ring and added the oily, odoriferous canned fish flesh. "There's another one. Shoo!" came the same woman's voice at site number 1. "Look, there's a raccoon on the picnic table. It's got the buns. Get off of there!" Over at site number 2, we enjoyed a leisurely supper at table, sipped some gourmet hot cocoa, and washed up the dishes below the low-hanging sky. There wasn't a raccoon to be seen or heard until we'd settled into our tent and caught the strains of the woman's cute voice, now shrill and murderous. "Hey, that frolicking raccoon just tore a hole in the tent!" Only, she didn't say frolicking. The outdoors is a wild and dangerous place, populated with shameless, grease-seeking, ring-tailed miscreants. It's not for the meek, or credulous, or unsuspecting. Be well advised, my domesticated friends, of the inherent hazards of nature. Frolic at your own risk.
Was a heartbreak, a blood soak. When the river ran red, I knew we could not float. I walk with you through the great divide. Still I'm yours from the other side. Oh, how the tall grass reaches wide. Ghost of the buffalo passing by. Lincoln, how will your country die? Rain falls hard from that open sky. It's been a long walk. I'll go one step further. Don't hate the view from the ground up. Could we build again from the sound of the truth? The truth, the truth, the truth, the truth, the truth. Oh, how the tall grass reaches wide. Ghost of the buffalo passing by. Lincoln, how will your country die? Rain falls hard from that open sky.
I was told to write a story about animals, and I suppose I'm the right person for that task. I lived my entire childhood surrounded by animals, farm animals, pets, wildlife. And as an adult, I've built my career around animals. From my time working various positions in animal shelters, to investigating crimes against animals, to emergency animal rescue during natural disaster response. My work has taken me across the United States and has brought me face to face with all sorts of species. From pets to livestock to wildlife, cattle, dogs, rabbits, deer, bear, cranes, eagles, you name it, and I've probably been around it, or bitten by it, or tried to get a rope around it. So I could tell you any number of stories. I could tell you about a frightened horse I coaxed out of a rundown, glass-filled garage in the middle of the night in rural Wisconsin. Or I could tell you about breaking up a fight between two professionally trained dogfighting dogs while I was trapped with them in the back of a small van one hot afternoon in southern Indiana. I'll never forget the giraffes and the 200-some koi fish that my team moved out of the path of wildfires in California. Or the hungry 15-foot Burmese python I pulled out of a cramped, dark box in the midst of a drug search warrant. I could tell you about the seemingly endless number of baths I gave to an injured Samoyed dog pulled out of contaminated Hurricane Harvey floodwaters in Texas. I could tell you about the faces of the thousands of animals I've held and comforted and healed and helped in an effort to give them a better life. But I could also tell you about the faces of the ones I couldn't save, and the faces of the ones I held in my arms as their lives came to an end. But the story I'll share tonight is simpler than all of those. It happened at the very beginning of my career, even before I knew it was going to be a career. Back when I was just a kennel attendant at an animal shelter right here in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, just out of college, not yet sure who I was or where I wanted to go. I want to tell you about the puppy who taught me about being angry. Working at an animal shelter is exhausting. It's physically demanding, emotionally burdensome, mentally challenging. There seems to be never-ending laundry and dirty dishes. There are always medications to dispense and bowls to fill. And at open intake shelters like the one where I worked, a ceaseless stream of helpless, homeless animals trickling, sometimes surging through the intake door. There is always work to do and never enough time to do it all. I came into that work not at all a stranger to physical labor. I was a farm kid after all. But the first month I worked at an animal shelter was a shock to my system. After a year, it was still exhausting. But by then I'd found my rhythm and my purpose. And in the arrogance of only granted by being in one's early 20s, I thought I'd seen it all. And then one day, my coworker came to me while I was cleaning dog kennels and said, "You've got to come see this puppy. He's so pretty, but so angry." By this point, I'd seen hundreds of aggressive dogs come into the shelter. While it wasn't pleasant, it wasn't unusual. But when I got back to the intake kennel, I saw this puppy was different. My coworker was right. He was beautiful. Pale gray and white feathery hair, big soft feet, with blue eyes that looked colder than ice. A picture-perfect husky puppy. But he wasn't just aggressive like other dogs I'd seen. This puppy was backed all the way into the furthest corner of his kennel, eyes darting between all of us, staring with the most irate resolve I'd ever seen from a dog. He wanted no part of this kennel, this shelter, or these people, none of it. He was angry. Often the best thing you can do for a frightened animal is to give it space, so we decided to give him time alone in the quiet intake kennel before any of us tried to handle him. I went back to cleaning kennels and filling food bowls, but the puppy stayed in my mind. There was something about him that was different, something that seemed familiar. When I finished with my morning cleaning, feeding, and medication rounds, I went back to the puppy's kennel, and there he was, still backed into his corner, still angry. But there was something else there. I just didn't quite know what it was. At last, I opened the kennel door and slowly stepped inside. He was small, and this was a large kennel, so there was still a lot of space between us. I closed the door quietly and simply sat down in the corner opposite the puppy. I didn't look at him. Dogs aren't comfortable with sustained eye contact. It's threatening to them, at least until they understand that you're not a threat. So I looked at the spot between the wall and the floor across from me. I kept him in my peripheral vision, and I did the only thing that felt right. I just sat there. You see, at this point in my life, I was a little bit of an angry puppy too. I was just 22 years old, and my father had died recently, and quite unexpectedly. It's difficult to put into words how much my dad meant to me. He was older when he became a father, 40 years old when I was born. And he was kind and gentle and brilliant. He taught me to read and to write and to think critically. In many ways, he's to thank for the wildlife side of my animal experience. He and both my grandfathers worked for the DNR, so I spent a lot of my youth in the woods with them, learning the names of all the trees and how to identify animal droppings, how to track deer, how to call does and turkeys with your voice, how to smell a bear before you see it. They smell good. When I was a teenager, he and his colleagues were preparing the very first wolf management plan for the state of Wisconsin. And because he knew I loved the work, he excused me from school to go into the field with him for wolf den mapping and radio collaring, and at night we'd go howling. Later, I accompanied him on field work with bear and cranes and white-tailed deer and so many others, and I needed a little management help. My father was a support and a comfort and an inspiration, and then suddenly he was gone. Then less than 2 weeks after his death, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. I'm not sure how to begin to make anyone understand who my mom was. She was my hero. She was the mom that everybody called Mom. She knew how to cook anything and make any Halloween costume and could sing and draw and paint and weave. She was the color and the strength of our family. And while my dad taught me how to study animals, it was my mom who taught me how to understand them. The very first day she brought me home after my birth, she took me to the barn to meet the horses. I was riding horses in her lap before I could crawl. She taught me about dogs and their language, how to bottle feed injured baby bunnies, how to stay in the saddle while the horse under you spooks and runs off. She taught me how to feel what animals are thinking and how to respect every species, what makes every species different. She taught me that everything from a great rampaging bull to a small bumblebee deserves kindness and respect. She taught me how to be strong for those weaker than me. I wanted to be just like her because she was the most invincible person I'd ever known. But I wasn't. Now my life was suddenly spinning as I navigated losing my supportive and wonderful father, then watching as my mother, my strong and indomitable hero, weakened and withered before my eyes. I didn't know yet that the cancer would take her within the year, but somewhere inside, I suspected it. I was trapped in a situation I wasn't ready for, and I felt alone. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. So I was angry too. After about 40 minutes, in the corner of my vision, I saw the puppy quiver. I could feel the anger radiating from him, as I'm sure it had been radiating from me for some time. But there was something familiar in that quiver, something I could feel too. We were both in a new, scary place, backed into corners with no way out, trapped in some place we didn't want to be, some place we didn't deserve to be. And then it hit me. We weren't angry. We were scared. And like so many species, when scared, it's either flight or fight. And we chose fight. After all, angry gives you a target. It gives you a reason to yell or growl or hit or bark or bite or scream. It keeps you going. But what do you do when you're just scared? What do you do when you can't run or hide or fight? And then, without meaning to, I whimpered like a puppy. The puppy's face changed. He cocked his head to the side. I whimpered again. He leaned forward. I whined a long, sad puppy whine. He shuffled forward on his belly, concerned. I looked over at him. His face said, "Oh, you're trapped here too. But we're here together. You're not alone anymore." And I wasn't. And neither was he. Over the next few weeks, the puppy slowly came around. At first, I was the only one who could feed him or take him out of his kennel. I was the only one he trusted. But slowly, I learned that other people could be safe too. And eventually, he found the one person he loved the most, and I watched him grow and flourish in the home that would love him forever. It took a long time for me to let other people help me carry my fear and my sadness, and to learn how to live with it instead of hiding from it. Dogs can't speak, so I'll never know exactly what my angry puppy was thinking that day in the kennel. But I suspect that, like me, he was relieved to stop running and hiding, to simply find a quiet space to sit with fear, to get to know it, and to find someone to help carry it.
Sweet willow tree, deep river weep, I've got too many eyes to take in what I've seen. Deep river bed, so much in this head will take this river down. Sold and sleeping sound, da 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 dum dum da 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 Sweet willow tree, deep river weep, I've got too many eyes to take in what I've seen. Deep river bed, so much in his head will take this river down, floating sweet and sound. Sweet willow tree, deep river weep, I've got too many eyes to take in what I've seen. Deep river bed, so much in his head will take this river down, floating sweet and sound. Sweet willow tree, deep river weep, I've got too many eyes to take in what I've seen. Deep river bed, so much in his head will take this river down, floating sweet and sound.
When we write about animals, we can't help writing about ourselves. I learned this a few years ago when I wrote a book called Mapping the Farm, and found that I couldn't write about a farm family without also writing about animals, as well as plants and machinery and the very soil itself. So I'd like to read 3 short scenes from that book that all revolve around a shy, mostly unseen mammal with a prominent overbite. In this first scene, my father-in-law is making hay. He's riding a windrower, which is a kind of flying wedge with a 12-foot cutter bar in front that cuts alfalfa and anything else in its path. Ed lowers the cutter head 2 inches above the ground and engages the sickle bar. The scissoring motion of its triangular serrated teeth adds a new dimension to the clatter, the snicking of 1,000 knives being whetted. The motion of the reel itself is hypnotic, like watching waves break as we sickle through alfalfa, white clover, and brome grass, not to mention several varieties of butterfly. Beneath its false floor of blossoms, the field looks level, but it isn't. There are hidden moguls and clear evidence of gophers whose fan-shaped mounds are scattered about the field as if somebody had dumped buckets of loose dirt at random. Deer may eat more corn, but gophers wreck more farm machinery. Backing away from the mound, Ed raises the cutter bar a few inches, then guns the windrower up and over, sliding on the moist cuttings and filling the air with diesel fumes and the sweet, sour fragrance of freshly cut alfalfa. 4 rods short of finishing, the windrower breaches a particularly large gopher mound and dirt sprays up from the reel. The machine clatters louder than ever. Stopping in midfield, Ed raises the cutter bar. With the engine still running, we jump down to scrape clots of mud and grass off the sickle. Even at rest, the triangular steel blades give off a bad karma. Ed disappears under the reel. Sickle bar's broke, he says ruefully. That's $100 right there. The annual Gopher Count dance in Eota, Minnesota is the only dance I know of named for a rodent and world champion windrow wrecker. The town hall is packed, every table staked out with purses, raincoats, and plastic cups of beer, while their owners whirl on the dance floor. The band announces something called a circle schottisch, and before I can head for the car, 2 circles form on the dance floor. Men on the inside, women on the outside. When the circles begin revolving in opposite directions, Sharon is swept away and I'm presented with a succession of older partners. The inner ring of men all have short-sleeved check shirts and sunburned necks, and some are missing fingers. The outer ring of women is a softer, ampler version of its hub. After each twirl and exchange, there's a slight adjustment to the new partner's height and girth, and since I'm mostly watching my own feet, the sensation of passing a perfume counter. We hold each other at arm's length, avoid eye contact, and smile as we maneuver around the room to the tune of "Oh, You Can't Get to Heaven." Round and round we go. Despite the open windows and ceiling fans, I'm sweating pitchers of beer and, strangely, enjoying myself. Dancing has never seemed so courteous, more a social contract than a free-form performance art. There's a ring of time aura to the dance, a sense of life's brevity as you're passed from one creased face to another, but also in the simple repetition of movements, the sweet notion that nothing really changes, that we're all in this together and might as well enjoy it. Gradually, we come full circle, like the hands of a clock, and arrive where we started, back to our original partner as the song ends and everybody applauds. Those old guys, Sharon says, really know how to dance. Last scene. A few days after the dance, Sharon's sister Rita calls to say she has a gopher problem. She lives in a new subdivision a mile north of the farm. When we arrive, 4 fresh gopher mounds are clustered by the driveway. I don't mind if to stay in the woods, says Rita. It's when they dig in the lawn that I mind. Sharon kneels down beside the largest of the fan-shaped mounds and digs with her hands for the tunnel, which is always at the stem of the fan. The tunnel isn't much wider than my fist and slants downward as much as 500 feet in length with a network of chambers and lateral shafts linking the mounds, all belonging to a single animal, since the gopher is a solitary, territorial creature that will fight to the death over its burrow. Before Sharon slips the spring trap inside, I wriggle my fingers in the tunnel and wonder if they might not look to the occupant like a many-headed earthworm. And here's what else I'd like to know. Do gophers carry a memory of the surface? And if they emerged in a new subdivision instead of an alfalfa field, would they care? I've been reading up on gophers since their lives remain such a mystery. Like us, they don't hibernate in cold weather, but put up their own hay in underground storage chambers to last the winter. They live in an almost entirely subterranean existence, venturing above ground mainly at night to forage on grasses and legumes, rarely moving more than a few feet from the tunnel entrance. If they view the surface as we do the dirt, as a nasty place and potential burial plot, it's because every predator has gopher on the menu. Foxes and coyotes dig them from the ground, bull snakes slither down their tunnels, and hawks and owls carry them aloft and pick their bones from treetops. With death at every turn, it's no wonder the gopher hugs the earth and emerges reluctantly to feed. Only when the urge to mate becomes overpowering does the male risk remaining above the surface for any length of time. Then he throws caution to the wind and travels cross-country on low-slung legs, usually at night, but sometimes in broad daylight, in search of a mate. Heedless of the danger, stopping to sniff every burrow, bloodied perhaps from encounters with other males, until at last he smells the cachet of the other sex and descends into the darkness, hopeful but alert, a fool for love.
I will be your pharmacon, keep you well when day is young, light your life just like the sun, steal your breath when day is done, love like a poison. September is going, gone. I will be your remedy, bring you up and help you see, hold you close then set you free, promise what I cannot keep. Buried deep is a quiet seed. Winter comes and all the small creatures sleep. I will be your rising moon, across the water calling moon, here and there but leaving soon, lonely and pining for you, love. You're a fickle rule. Go home, you're drunk, you wandering fool. I will be your pharmacon, keep you well when day is young, light your life just like the sun, steal your breath when day is done, love like a poison. horizon. September is going, 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 going.
48 years of being partnered with Seeing Eye Dogs includes beginning, ending, and working to bring out the best with 10 unique canines. Here's a bit from Hope of the Crow about the end of a working relationship with Fran and the beginning of the partnership with Luna. A new Seeing Eye Dog, Journeying and Miracles, August 24, 2012. I recently came back from training with my 9th Seeing Eye Dog. She's a beautiful little yellow lab named Luna. Since I've had Seeing Eye Dogs for 39 years, you might think it'd be old hat to train with a new one, but it isn't. The journey is an intense one, full of heartache and miracles, and it continues as we adjust to each other and to my home environment. St. John of the Cross wrote, "If a man wants to be sure of the road he treads on, he must close his eyes and walk in the dark." This journey began when my Seeing Eye Dog Fran was diagnosed with a vision problem this spring that was unfixable and meant she could not safely guide me. The fact that she was only 5, in the prime of her working life, made it especially hard to take. I thought and prayed long and hard about whether to keep her as a pet because I so enjoyed her company, or find a good home for her. Finally, I decided on the latter because a family or an individual with a car could take her out in public as a pet, which would be difficult for me as a single blind person to do. My network of friends was not coming up with exactly what I wanted in a home for her, so after more prayer, I went on local television and the station's website with my situation. The first email I got was from an animal rights person across the country who reamed me out for abandoning my dog in her hour of need. More prayer was needed to be able to kindly respond to her that actually I was considering my dog's needs ahead of my own desires to keep her. Luckily, the first miracle on the journey happened, and a couple dozen caring individuals around here emailed their contact information. After many phone calls and email exchanges, I interviewed 3 families and settled on a gal in town similar to me in age and lifestyle. A couple of exploratory visits made it clear that this was the right place for Fran. So I packed her bag of food, treats, toys, and medicine and delivered her and her stuff to her new home. I said bye without breaking into tears until I got out the door. The next day, I flew to the Seeing Eye in New Jersey. It is the oldest guide dog school in the United States, and I've been going there for about half of its existence. It used to have mostly ex-military dog handlers as instructors, and was much more formal and hierarchical than it is now, but its core values of respect for the individual and humane training of dogs for guide work have not changed. My classmates ranged in age from 20-something to 70-something, and were from all over the United States and Canada. Each individual pays a nominal fee, although the actual dog-human team costs $65,000 to produce. Initially, students walk with their instructor and discuss any preferences of breed or special life circumstances that might influence a good match. I'm a bit slower than when I was younger, but I still need a dog that is good in public for meeting situations ranging from visiting nursing homes to guest lecturing elementary and college students. A day and a half after arrival, I was matched with Luna. Luna was raised by a couple with a 21-year-old daughter who had raised several other Seeing Eye dogs. To me, it is always a miracle that caring individuals will pour enormous amounts of care and love into a dog for a year and then say goodbye and good luck to the animal so it can go into the months of training it takes to turn it into a guide dog. Luna's first placement was a home training for a blind gal with a young child. Unfortunately, the gal had medical issues and had to stop training within a week. So Luna went back to the Seeing Eye for more training with a new instructor and was picked for me. During my 18 days there, I had comprehensive training, from walking on roads with no sidewalks to riding trains, buses, and escalators if we have to. For me to trust my life to Luna takes a lot of hard work on the working relationship. We're learning to dance together, but the learning has just begun. I've been home for a few days now, and things are going extremely well. Luna was a calm flyer on her flight from New Jersey and has been to Mass and on several walks to learn routes. She's eating, eliminating, sleeping, and sharing great house manners. All the hard work of the puppy-raising family and her trainers is paying off. I've had 39 years of being a Seeing Eye dog user and hope to make the 50-year club at the Seeing Eye. Luna and I plan to have many fine years together. The report from Fran's retirement home is that she's loving sunning herself in the backyard, sleeping on a cushion by her new owner's bed, and has even been to a blues concert. Another happy ending and beginning. Two years later, November 2014, I just got back from a short trip to Arizona to see the awards given at the second annual Schneider Disability Issues in Journalism Forum. Luna is a great traveler, a good guide, and a wonderful icebreaker. But I'm amazed, she's also my moral teacher. Consider the following. The gospel at Mass today was from Luke about not being too attached to possessions and getting distracted by them. Yesterday, Luna and I were in the Phoenix airport waiting for our plane home. A little boy had a remote-controlled helicopter, which he zoomed over to bump Luna. He then commenced to make it zoom close to her and away from her to get her attention. She was interested for a bit. Seeing Eye training did not include what to do in this situation. After a while, she got up, turned around, and put her back end toward the temptation and lay down. Clearly, she said without words, "I'm not going to let this distract me from doing my job." After a couple minutes, the child tired of bugging her and went away. If only I could do as well at turning my back on things that distract me, like elections that don't go my way. As we waited in the airport, I dug out my pack with my 2-course lunch of nuts and chips. Luna sat up and fixed her gaze on every chip on its journey from the bag to my mouth. I didn't notice if she was trembling, but she sure was eager. She did get a chip. Perfect behavior on a 10-hour journey, needed rewarding, even if the general rule is no people food. If I could devote the same concentrated attention to doing the Lord's work that she gave to watching me, that would be a good thing. Thanks for the example, Luna. I know. Dog is God spelled backwards.
day we are together again. On the day we are together again, I will pull you in close like a hoop with no end. On the day we are together again. On the day we are together again. On the day we are together again, I will pull you in close like a hoop with no end. On the day we are together again.